Good morning, everybody. I would like to thank the Geneva Association and the IIS for the Shin Award and for inviting me to speak at this meeting. This is quite a unique opportunity to give you some ideas of what we do and what you do and how it could get together. So the paper that I'm presenting has been co-authored by Dr. David Raw and by Mamta Mehra, all of us from the Microinsurance Academy. So since it's still very early in the morning, and the coffee still has to kind of get into our blood, let me start with asking you a question. So what do you think the following personalities have in common? Che Guevara, Donald Trump, and Steffi Graf. Some idea? I mean, maybe all of them were great tennis players. Or they had the same views how economies in the world should be run. No, the answer is a little trivial. You know, all of them had their birthday on the 14th of June, which happens to be today. Well, just as a warm-up. But beyond that, you know, Che Guevara was born in 1928. And this was just a couple of years after the opening of the Texas and the Persian Gulf oil fields, inaugurated an era of cheap energy. And Donald Trump was born in 1946. And 8 years earlier, a man by the name of Guy Callender discovered that the world has warmed. And he linked it up to the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And Steffi Graf, well, she was born a little later, in 1969. And as you know, 1969 was also a very important year. That was the year when the first time astronauts walked on the moon. And we could see it, right, in the movie theater, I mean, in the TV. Well, I wasn't alive at that point. But what could we see? The Earth. We could see the Earth. And it was perceived as a fragile whole. You know, it changed our perspective. Now, how does it relate to what I'm doing, what we're doing? You know, climate change is a big topic these days. And it is undisputed that the climate has been changing, and it is still changing. And it puts a lot of threat on agriculture. And that's what I'm talking about, agriculture. And especially when we think about the developing world, and we are talking about insurance in this sector, in this area, in this region, then we see that smallholder farmers are facing big risks, and the risks are further increased. Now, crop insurance is perceived as a very unique tool, as a very important tool to deal with these risks in a very efficient way. And beyond dealing just with these risks, many people say that crop insurance has the potential to change the mindset of the people, the behavior. Why? Because think about smallholder farmers. They have to stay alive. They have to make some earnings. If currently what they are doing is they do small investment, small risk-taking, small return farming. If they could be insured, they could change their mindset from investing more, taking higher risks, and having a higher return. So for the insurance industry, this is a big market. It's a big opportunity. It's a mainly untouched market in the developing world, going to the smallholder farmers. But they are the majority. They produce most of the food we are eating. So how have things been done so far? Obviously, we started with traditional indemnity-based insurance, and it had all the problems when you went to the market, where you had small ticket sizes. What was the problem? Okay, obviously, high administrative costs. You had all the other problems, moral hazard, fraud, adverse selection. Then one of the innovations was, from the supply side, to address some of the issues, was to introduce index insurance. And index insurance, if you look at it from the demand side again, does not indemnify the loss, right? What happens is that you have an index which is ideally highly correlated to the loss, and it triggers a payout. Often enough, we see, unfortunately, that the index is not very well correlated with the payouts, with the losses. So let me continue. Beyond index insurance and traditional insurance, how was this pushed into the market? How did governments and other players, insurance companies, try to get into this market of the developing world, smallholder farmers? It were two main policy instruments. One was subsidies, And the second one was mandating. And mandating means basically forcing farmers to buy insurance. If they don't demand it, let's force them. And obviously, you cannot in general force people to buy something they don't want. So how do you do it? You link it up with something they want, and that are loans. You link it up with loans and say, you want to have a loan for agricultural purposes? You have to get the insurance. And the banks were happy because they could collateralize their loan. But this approach totally ignored the demand side. And it's not really surprising that it did not really pick up this solution. It did not really lead to voluntary uptake. So how can we come to a situation that we can catalyze demand? We at MIA have the evidence from implementation, from talking to farmers, and from research that you have to make the insurance solutions context relevant. You have to contextualize them to the context of the farmers. Then you have a chance to make it accepted by them. And the challenge is not, as most people think, a technological challenge. It's not like you have smartphones or you have mobile payments and other interesting stuff, or satellites. It's not a technological challenge. It is actually not even an administrative challenge. It is mainly a conceptual challenge. How do we perceive this market? How do we set up our processes? So there are mainly 3 points how we did it at MIA. One thing is we focused on the process. What we realized is that farmers or anyone in these rural communities, they don't trust outsiders. And in that regard, I'm also an outsider. And obviously you as the insurance industry are an outsider. They won't trust you. They trust their fellow community members. They trust other farmers. So use the farming community as a vehicle to reach out to the people. The second one is related to product design. I usually don't like the word product, but still, let's talk about product design. And if you think about crop insurance, it's about indices. I think most of the indices can be improved a lot, and this is what my presentation is about, to have a better correlation between loss and payout. And the third thing is, especially for crop insurance, you have to, you should not consider insurance as a stand-alone solution. That is not attractive to farmers. You have to link it up to other value-added services. And other value-added services could be, if you do weather index, you anyway have weather stations out there. So you can provide weather forecasts to farmers. It's extremely useful. Another thing you can do is you just aggregate the farmers and they share their best practices. So some advisory services on farming. These are the 3 main points we do for crop insurance. We do similar things also for health insurance and livestock insurance. So I wanted to focus in this presentation on the product design, and namely on index-based insurance. The main problem you have with index-based insurance is, while you overcome some of the problems, you introduced a new problem, which is basis risk. This is the risk that you have a mismatch between payout triggered by the index and the actual loss. And if that is not really matched well, your insurance is not very effective in reducing the risk, so it becomes very, very unattractive for a farmer to engage into this. So if you think about basis risk, it has mainly 2 dimensions. One is you have spatial basis risk. The weather station for settling, used for settlement, is maybe very far away from the farm. So the climate, the microclimate in the farm could be different from the weather station. It's a problem you could overcome with a lot of weather stations. Might be expensive, but theoretically you can deal with it. The other problem is design-related basis risk, which is a little bit more challenging, right? It is, if you think about weather index, one of the main problems is people only consider rainfall as a trigger. But often losses are related to high temperature or frost. And sometimes losses are not even related to weather, wild animal grazing or fire or who knows what. So even if you think further, there are certain risks which are not covariate by nature. They're idiosyncratic. You can never cover them by an index. So these design-related problems are always there, and that is basically also where we came in with our method, what we call climate cost of cultivation. This is a method to reduce basis risk in weather index insurance, namely through better addressing agricultural drought. And we demonstrated the CCC method in Bihar. It's a state in India, it's a big state, 100 million people. So we have been working there with winter wheat. It's a very important staple crop in entire northern India. And the CCC that we introduced basically deals with two things. It deals with crop loss, obviously, because it's a weather index, but it also deals with increase in cost of cultivation. You know, if there's a drought and you irrigate more, you might not have a crop loss, but you have a financial loss as a farmer. So we combined these two, and we cover situations like insufficient rainfall, too much rainfall, high temperature, and also other reasons for losses could be included. Now let me tell you how this index, the CCC, differs from other existing models. So one thing is we considered aggregated rainfall preceding the season we are considering, because this influences the soil moisture. And the soil moisture is at the end what is most important to the plant. So we focus on modeling the soil moisture in the first place and not only looking at rainfall. And the third thing is we combined the increase in cost of cultivation and yield loss by also including non-climatic parameters like soil moisture and groundwater depth. And what we found is in Bihar with winter wheat that when we compared it to a typical index insurance which is used by the insurance industry right now there, and when we looked at existing crop yield data and cost of cultivation data, that the correlation of our index with the actual losses increased to 76%, whereas with the typical index insurance it was only 20%. At the same time, the premium was much lower, so it became much more interesting for farmers. The main findings are basically we have a better modeling of agricultural drought, and this we achieved mainly by including non-climatic parameters, by focusing on modeling the soil moisture. But beyond all these little technical things, there's a very important, interesting thing which links it up to climate change. You know, you might have heard of the polluter pays principle. It means basically if farmers are suffering from climate change and the risk has been increased in terms of losses, why should they be the one who pay for it? But unfortunately, they are the people who pay for it, though they did not contribute much to climate change. Now, this method of climate cost of cultivation, I forgot the name of the method. Climate cost of cultivation, we had to find a fancy name, you know, that's why it's called climate cost of cultivation, CCC. This gives you a tool to quantify how much the risk has been increased of the farmer because of climate change. And once you can quantify it, you can separate this from the premium and let it be paid by someone else. And the someone else could be the climate funds or all the other people who want to support in climate change adaptation. And then the premium becomes cheaper, and you get more buy-in by the farmers. So I've been talking a lot about crop insurance, index insurance, but you know, I just want to say the main important conclusions you should take here is the typical model of insurance that we applied in what we call microinsurance did fail. The partner agent model did not deliver what it's supposed to deliver. Just mandating insurance did not lead to solutions. Just subsidizing did not lead to it. I'm not against subsidization, but it didn't lead to anything. We have to make insurance relevant to people. That's our task. And we cannot expect the governments to do it. The insurance industry is best placed. And people like me, organizations who work on the ground. We have to make it relevant to the farmers, that's one thing. And we have to use a different approach, a different business process than what we have used so far. And from our experience is that insurance becomes much more understood, much more trusted, much more accepted by rural communities if you follow a community-based, a peer-to-peer approach of engagement, a mutual aid, or you can say a cooperative approach. This is where the trust is in the communities. People trust each other. Utilize this, and you can reach the market. We have designed a better index. That's what we believe with the CCC. We have designed new processes also in health insurance, in livestock insurance. And it was an academic exercise. We did some pilots, so it was an implementation exercise, but we need the insurance industry, which has basically the business acumen that I don't have, that we don't have. You have the underwriting capacity, but that's not the most important thing. You have the business acumen. And we have the experience for the implementation in the field and the research. If we could get together, we could bring it to a different kind of level, to a different scale. Thank you very much.